Well, and these are very interesting times, aren't they? Very interesting times to be a libertarian. As you think about it, election seasons could always be educational, but this one, unlike none I've ever participated in, I've learned so much. I mean, do you feel like it's been kind of a very interesting thing to watch? I mean, I think it's a good thing, actually. We, as you look at the layout now, it's something I never experienced in my lifetime. You've got, wow, what do we have here? Well, we have Hillary Clinton, who is a kind of a fake leftist, actually, in a way. I mean, this is why the Bernie Sanders supporters despise her, because she basically has no principles, no ideals whatsoever. She might have began early in her life with certain ideals. And, and it's funny because when she was in law school, she wrote an essay on children's rights that ended up being cited favorably by Murray Rothbard. Actually, did you know that?
No.
The only, Murray Rothbard actually cited her in his book Ethics of Liberty. But, all the WikiLeaks stuff's coming out, we know now, pretty much, whatever, she doesn't have any ideals, she just wants power, and we all know this. Trump is a very interesting case. Apparently a man who successfully trolled the Republican Party, right? By manipulating the nationalism and racialism of the base or something. The party elites didn't know what to do. They eventually had to give him the nomination. And even the Bushes, won't even endorse him. The Bushes have all said that they're voting for Hillary Clinton, which is just a remarkable thing. He represents a kind of something I never thought I would see in my lifetime, which is a revival of sort of interwar fascist ideology. I never thought I would see this ever. I read about it in history books. You have to sort of do a deep dive into ideological history to discover this, and then suddenly out of nowhere, pow, it appears in real life right before you. It's just astonishing, really. I heard him speak for the first time in June of 2015 at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas. And it was a mind-blowing experience, really, because I had just finished reading a 1944 book called Omnipotent Government, which is a big attack on the Nazis by Ludwig von Mises, my favorite economist. And then Trump began to speak, right after this. And it's like he just kind of, Mises traces the rise of Hitler, from chapter 1 to chapter 2. And it's almost like Trump read the same book and decided to do a kind of reenactment, So I was intrigued and really just riveted by this whole experience, and wrote an article that came out in Newsweek magazine a couple weeks later called "Donald Trump is a Fascist." So yeah, I've been on the hit list now for a very long time. If he ever gets president, I'm definitely going to be deported. So hope you come with me. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen because it seems like all along all he ever wanted is a TV show. But look, this is all great stuff. It's all wonderful news for us. I think it's thrilling because at long last we have some clarity about ideology. When I was growing up, the pro-liberty position was mixed up with a lot of other things. It was mixed up with foreign policy, imperialism, a desire to build more nuclear weapons and expand the military, the Christian right, which is, has grave doubts about civil liberties and so on. And then there was us, and we had to kind of hang out with the Republicans, celebrating free enterprise or something. Well, we've been totally tossed out now, by the Trump forces. And I think it's awesome in a way, because we can see with profound clarity what the structure of the state is now. It's two forms of authoritarianism, two forms of revanchism, I call it, which is a kind of a French ideology. Let's reclaim lost territory. Let's go back. Two kinds of reactionary ideologies, vaguely left-tinged and then hard right. That's what we're dealing with today. And now we have a clear third option, which is, in many ways, in an electoral sense, embodied by the Libertarian Party. But I'm not, Gary's a friend of mine and I love him, but I don't think that's the important thing. I think the important thing is that the ideological structure of our time is dramatically changing to accord with the reality all around us. And it's the reality all around us that's the really dramatic change in my lifetime. Because, my friends, I mean, it's extraordinary to see this and say this, but despite what you see at the electoral level, at the presidential level, liberty is busting loose uncontrollably all over the world, and nobody can stop it anymore. I think that the institutions of the nation state, as they've arisen over the last 100 years, are not long for this world. Everything is going down. You can see it in every area. In public opinion, 2/3 of Americans say they don't like either of these people. You can tell it even in the debates. I mean, you watch these things, right? It's very strange. It's like watching, a 1980s sitcom or something like that. They're not talking about anything of the world that we know. The world has changed so dramatically over the last 10 years that the political establishment can't even coherently talk about it anymore because they don't even know anything about it, actually. I mean, it's very interesting. I think it was in the second debate when the subject of cybersecurity came up, and they couldn't even form complete sentences to describe what they were talking about. I think Trump kept saying, yeah, we got to do something about the cyber. So no, I mean, there's a guy who wants to destroy Amazon.com. I mean, it's just crazy. And Hillary Clinton, probably slightly more intelligent, but she too regrets the state of the world. She's, called for speech controls on the internet. But it's just not going to happen. It can't happen. That's all right. It's still early in the digital age. We're still trying to figure out the etiquette. These norms take a long time to develop.
I'm so sorry.
So this conference is about free speech, and I really want you to understand something really important about this subject. Free speech, like freedom of religion, freedom of association, this bedrock value of society. We can't ever let it go. We must always expand it, never tolerate a single compromise to it ever. But let's remember something even more important. Free speech, freedom of religion, these kinds of institutions are not isolated things. They're part of a larger ideological, philosophical, structural fabric that has to be the driving force in any kind of viable, peaceful, prosperous social evolution. And that fabric has traditionally been known as liberalism. Liberalism. And I don't know how many of you in this room identify yourself openly as a liberal, but I'm telling you, you are, actually. That's what you are today. You can call yourself whatever you want. I call myself an anarchist if I want to put people at ease. Libertarian, very long, complicated word. But at the end, we're liberals. We're liberals. It's a 500-year-old tradition. It began slowly with a recognition that you didn't have to have a single religion dominating society to have a religious society. It grew out of the religious force. And suddenly, a handful of intellectuals in late Middle Ages said, you know what? Maybe we should stop all this endless civil war over religion and just let people believe whatever they want. You want to try that for a little while? Well, let's try it, see what happens. They tried it and it worked. It made everybody better off. This is the same thing with speech. Maybe we should stop trying to control speech and just let people say whatever they want. It's not a bad thing, actually, even if they criticize government. It works. And so that happened. And so it is with freedom of association. How about if we just let people move wherever they want? That sounds like chaos. It could be like anarchy. But it worked. And so it was with trade, free trade, and ownership. And all these institutions of freedom began to flow out gradually, a little bit at a time over the centuries. Between, say, I would say maybe the late 15th century, leading up to the Industrial Revolution, and then finally, everything came together in the 19th century, the great age of laissez-faire, which is the world between the end of the Napoleonic Wars and the beginning of World War I. A world in which you could travel anywhere you wanted without a passport. You could enter any profession without having to beg government for permission. You could invent any technology, invite people to buy it, and have it tested on the market. And here's the amazing thing to me. You could make all the money you wanted and keep every bit of it for yourself. Right? Right? Hard to imagine. Actually, so this is the structure of the world called liberalism. And they were called liberals, and that was the right word for them. There's no better replacement for that term. I keep falling back on it because I think it's the right way to describe it. It has a rich history in Europe and the UK and the United States. That's what you are, that's what you believe. These days this word is not well understood. I'll just give you two anecdotes. One, I was at an Atlanta gun range a couple months ago, and I was firing a semi-automatic. I said, do you have any fully automatics? He said, well, sure, I do. And I said, okay, that's amazing, you have these things. I thought they were illegal. He said, well, you know, that law expired, and now you can use these fully automatic weapons at gun ranges because the law expired. It's a restriction for private ownership of gun ranges can have them. And I said, that's wonderful, so the law was liberalized. And the guy stopped, and he goes, I don't know what you mean by liberal, but I ain't no liberal. So, no, I don't, sorry, I misspoke. I just mean that, like, you're freer than you are before. Because, well, whatever, I just ain't no liberal. So it doesn't always work. And in an interview with a Canadian Broadcasting Corp the other day, they called me up because, I did an extended interview with him about how Donald Trump does not represent the capitalist ideal, that he's kind of giving us a bad name in a way. And he said, well, what are your politics? And I said, well, I'm just a straight out liberal, just a really radical liberal in my orientation. He goes, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, I love commercial society and freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Just freedom. I don't think you need an authoritarian structure to run society. I think society contains within itself the capacity for its own self-organization. I said, well, okay, that's fine. Well, it turned out there was and this interview was heard by like 2 million people, and there was an explosion that followed in Canada. Like, people were just outraged that I would be calling myself a liberal. Like, they can't understand it. And the uproar was so intense that they had to do a second show, actually, on the term liberal and its history and its meaning. And it was actually a wonderful show. I loved it. It just came out yesterday. So I'd like to bring that back, this term, especially now, because the left they've abandoned the term. If you don't hear people call themselves liberals anymore on the left. Now they call themselves progressives, which is very strange to me for a number of reasons. One is, of all people that are opposed to progress, I would let the second thing is that the progressives, 100 years ago, they were sort of at their height, it was called progressives in the US. These people were the most wicked, monstrous group of intellectuals you can possibly believe. They were hardcore racists, misogynists, nativists. They were exterminationists towards people who were not like themselves. They erected all kinds of institutions to control society in the name, really, of preserving the rights of the ruling class against the masses. That's who these bastards were, and they're disgusting. If you don't know anything about the history of the progressive era, I urge you to read about it. It's sick to your stomach. So the idea that anybody would want to take on that label is very strange to me. Anyway, they can have it, fine. They're leaving the term liberal on the table. So I think it's something we should just adopt as our own. I don't know how viable this is, but I think there's something to it. In 1927, Ludwig von Mises wrote a book called Liberalism in German. And the American edition came out in 1954, the first one. And he was asked, he was told by the American publishers that the term liberal in the United States means something completely different, and he has to call it something else. So he's had a profound sense of regret. But he eventually came up with the title, The Free and Prosperous Commonwealth. So So it was issued under that title. 10 years later, when the second edition came out, Mises said, you know what? I hate this new title. We're going to call it the right thing. We're going to call it liberalism. It's the only right word for what we believe in. So they went with it. So it still exists today. You can download it at free.org. It's called Liberalism. In that book, it's just a wonderful book, but he describes what the core institutions of liberalism are. And I'll just lay them out for you, just briefly. Private property, number one, because without private property, you can't have any other freedom. It's essential. It's essential to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of association. Without private property, you don't have anything to control and no way to exercise your freedom. So it's the core institution. Another one is free trade. Liberalism rejects mercantilism. It doesn't regard the nation-state community as some sort of homogenous acting unit with its own independent rights. It affirms the value of the division of labor, not just within a single nation, but across borders also. And a third one, it's very interesting, tolerance. Tolerance. The idea of tolerance is that you don't have to agree with what a person believes or does. You don't have to approve of every way a person uses their rights to their individual bodies or their property, to nonetheless believe in their rights to do it. Tolerance affirms the distinction between a vice, of which I have plenty, by the way, and a crime. A crime is the kind of thing that imposes on other people's rights. But a vice is something that is a choice you make. It may not be good for you, but it doesn't hurt anybody else. So to Mises, tolerance was a central liberal virtue. Peace. Peace, above all else. Without peace, we can't build civilization. If you're always at war, civil war, coup d'etat, global war, the violence of the state, if that's pervasive, you can't build capital infrastructures, you can't really have trade, you can't really have innovation. You can't make a good life for yourself so long as there's war present. So an essential tenet of liberalism is peace, anti-war. That's why liberals like myself are opposed to war more than anything else. And when I say war, I just don't mean bombs dropping on other countries, all of drones, although we do mean that. But it also means the conflict engendered by the state in general. The kinds of things that cause us to turn against each other and regard our neighbor as our possible enemy. Anything that foments a sort of attitude of conflict in society rather than an opportunity for cooperation. Low-grade war can be just as bad and damaging to civilization. And this is where politics of our time has been so deadly and so horrible. 2016, we've seen this outer structure of politics that's sort of invading our lives, turning us against our neighbors. I mean, how many people have you banned on Facebook? I'm up to like 200 now, right? I mean, I feel really bad about this. I don't like doing this. I like to get along with people. I don't like to fight with them over pointless things like ideology. It's ridiculous. And it's all caused by politics. Politics is causing us to feel warlike towards each other. And, this is, I think, why the other day, when Trump said that he would not accept the results of the election, there was such an uproar, such a sense of shock and alarm about it. I mean, did you wonder why there was such horror? Because I haven't personally accepted the results of any election in my life. So, I mean, what does it even mean? But here's what you need to understand. Behind his statement, there was a sort of a vague threat that this movement could turn to some means other than democracy to obtain power. There was a sense that maybe he was suggesting possible violence, something ominous would be coming that would displace democracy. And that's a very, very scary prospect. I don't know for sure if you meant that, but that's what accounts for the alarm. It's because, I'm not a huge fan of democracy, but let me just say this. In the history of the rise of the idea of liberty, democracy played, I saw that coming, it was like, democracy played a very important part. Because democracy means the peaceful transition of leadership and government. So we don't have to slit the king's throat. We don't have to have a civil war. We don't have to hate our neighbors. We don't have to use violence to displace one group of leaders with another one, because that's very costly and socially damaging. So the idea of democracy came about as an alternative to domestic violence. So in many ways, there's a sense in which democratic institutions are a very important aspect of liberalism also. I mean, democracy is a radically imperfect solution, but it's far better than military juntas and violence and that sort of thing. So that's liberalism. It's not being represented very well in today's electoral environment, but I think it's coming. And you could see it just a little bit emerging. I mean, the success of the Gary Johnson campaign is just one sign of it. But more than that, you see in public opinion polls, academics, in opinion, in the growth of opinion and within Silicon Valley, among many sectors of life, that liberalism is growing increasingly important. In fact, I think it's probably the future. Not because we're engaged in massive ideological agitation, it's something else. It's because liberalism represents the reality that we're living in right now, and nothing else can account for it. The state and its tools, its weapons, and its regulations, and its bureaucracies, and its big programs are no longer effectively managing the world. And I mean across the board. I don't mean just like Republicans, Democrats, left and right. I mean everything the government does is increasingly anomalous to the way, there's no other way of saying it sucks, to the way the reality is working. Let me just give you two examples, and two very important examples. The first one concerns the Iraq War. Now, depending on when you date the beginning of this thing has been going on more or less for 25 years, with no end in sight. The headlines are still all about bombings and attacks and political instability. Essentially, what the US did is took a more or less civilized country with symphonies, universities, a place that had a problem with too many immigrants coming in there to live. Yes, it was run by an autocratic despot, but women could have bank accounts, they could drive, you could get a drink, versus me, what civilization really is all about. And they blew it to smithereens and left nothing in its wake. Actually, that would have been nice to leave nothing in its wake. What it actually left in its wake is a massive terror organization that's now causing demographic upheavals all over Europe in the name of ISIS. Islamic radicalism is a direct outgrowth of this. So this was probably the most damaging war of our lifetime. I mean, Vietnam, we got over that pretty quickly after the US decided to pull out. World War II ended more or less peacefully. Korea was a disaster, what was going on, but it didn't have any lasting damage. The Iraq War has created an unbelievable calamity all over the region and all over Europe. In other words, everything went wrong. And this was a central pillar of 2 or 3 presidential or 4 presidential administrations. So what are you gonna do? This is what they promised. Look at the results. It was catastrophic. And this is one area where Trump is actually right, even though he did support the Iraq. So that's it. And I have some sense that the warfare machinery has been dealt a devastating blow by this. The second example I want to give is the most famous domestic initiative of the 2 terms of a very popular president, Obama, what would be that great achievement domestically of Obama? Anybody?
Healthcare.
Yeah. Obamacare. Obamacare. The thing that even he doesn't like to bring up. You know, he gave a full speech at the DNC, at the end, before Clinton was nominated. It was a brilliant speech. But the thing that I was struck by most of it is it never once mentioned his healthcare, his healthcare reform. That gives you a sense of where we are on this. History's on fast forward, you know. It took like 30 years for people to figure out that Medicare was going bankrupt, and like 40 years for Social Security to blow up, and about 24 hours for Obamacare. Nobody's stopping this thing. In fact, the thing has been such a calamity, actually, that even Bill Clinton himself is not defending it anymore. And it really, I would say, it's made the entire ruling class apparatus very wary of ever doing anything like this again. Nothing happened. You know, they had it all perfectly mapped out on paper. This is what we'll do. You know, a committee sat in a room and said, what do you think we should mandate everybody get in their healthcare provisions? Well, we should have mental health, and yeah, it should help for this, and this disease, and that disease, and this got longer and longer and longer. They said, great, well, here's great. What we'll do is we'll put it on a big piece of paper, that'll be thousands of pages, and we'll get it signed by the president, and that will cause it to happen. You know? This is the level of naivety of these people, you know, that they think that you just pass a big law and the reality adapts. But it didn't adapt. The thing has been a disaster. Premiums, you know, up, healthcare less and less available. I know for myself and most of my friends, you know, people dread going to the doctor now. You try to stay away because you don't know what's going to happen to you. You know, is it going to cost you $40 or $4,000? I don't know. You know, you just don't know. People are being forced to pay for healthcare they can't afford. I mean, it's the worst possible world. And many people on the left are saying we should have a single payer. Well, I don't like that idea. It sounds terrible. At some level, it actually makes more sense than Obamacare. Obamacare is not going to last. It's a disaster. I think the future is going to be towards privatization. So these are two gigantic anomalies that have entered into the paradigm of statism, to the paradigm of the total state, to the anti-liberal idea that emerged in the course of the 20th century, that we shouldn't just let people live their lives. We should intervene without limit in everything everybody does, and therefore people will be happy, we'll make everything more prosperous, more peaceful, more wonderful, and people will thank us. It didn't work out that way. This system has been around for about 100 years, and now it's in its last stages. It's starting to collapse in the same way that Russian socialism collapsed and socialism around the world collapsed is happening to us, too. We're starting to see it. Some people doubt it. I don't. There are many countries in the world that are getting freer, not the US, but many countries are showing the way. New Zealand, ironically Sweden, and Norway, and Finland, much freer now than they were 20 years ago. I think we're headed to the same direction. And it's going to happen through a variety of means. Political, yes, but technology, cultural resistance, exhaustion on the part of the population with the kind of rackets that the political class has been playing. This election has been catastrophic for the cause of illiberalism or statist management of society, because it's discredited the political class. And it's not just it's not just for us in this room, it's also for the permanent bureaucracy of the nation state itself. Do you think if you were a busy bee working away at the Department of Labor to calculate unemployment statistics or whatever you do, you're going to have any respect for the incoming regime that's hated by 2/3 of the public, no matter who wins? I don't think so. You're starting to see this big gap develop between the permanent bureaucracy and the ruling class, which is a very big sign of an instability of the political system. That's what's going on. They can't keep it together. So this brings me to the third example I'd like to raise with you about the unsustainability of illiberalism or of the total state. It has to do with technology, which is very much outrunning the capacity of the government. to manage it. And I don't mean just like in speed, but in structure too. The world of digital commerce is impervious to management. And I could give you many examples. I mean, I'd love to talk to you about Bitcoin, about Open Bazaar, about distributed networks, all the rest of it. There's a beautiful anarchy breaking out all over in the world of technology. Let's just take a step back one day and consider what happened yesterday. You know what happened yesterday? I don't know if it affected you, but like a third of the internet went down for people. I don't know if it's down for you or not. So I don't know if you looked into what happened here, okay? I could quickly tell the story, because I understand it, because this is fascinating to me. So a DDoS attack hits a company called DYN, or DYN, which is a DNS registrar and provides packet switching services for all kinds of servers all over the country. It's a big part of the infrastructure backbone of the internet. And a DDoS attack hit. Now, what is a DDoS attack? It's called a distributed denial of service attack. Distributed because, here's the thing, many people's digital devices around the country are infected. They've got little bots hiding on them because of bad security on the part of individuals, because of operating machines like Windows that are still to this day full of holes. The fact is that we've got millions of machines running in this country that are actually have been become part of a sort of a clone army, a sort of a secret society. They're under the control of hackers, and the users don't know it. The hackers don't use this access very often, but when they want to deploy it, they can. So this drone army got to work Friday morning and started hammering all kinds of server systems around the country with database requests and hits. Too many to be sustained. You're going about as your server admin, you know about this. You have expected levels of traffic, everything's fine, and suddenly it spikes 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. Your servers can't handle the load, and they crash. And then one crash leads to another crash, and another crash, and so on it goes. The next thing you know, you've unplugged the motor of the world. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, this is awesome power, and it was done by hackers. Where? Probably somebody in this room, I don't know. Nobody knows, right? The drone army of. So here's the thing, why did it happen? This is where it gets interesting. So Julian Assange is the head of WikiLeaks. And he's being held in a embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And he's been, over the last several weeks, releasing all kinds of private emails of Hillary Clinton and her friends to make them look, like they are. I mean, just sort of conniving, quote-driven politicians with a set aside. And it's been, a little bit harmful to the Hillary Clinton campaign. This upset the Ecuadorian government very much because this is a socialist country that's always had very bad relations with the US until very recently when commodity prices collapsed, right? Oil prices collapsed, commodity prices collapsed. And suddenly the source of government revenue to the Ecuadorian government began to fall. They're no longer able to pay their employee pensions or even their employees. The GDP began to fall, and so Ecuador is like sitting around going, we suck, what are we gonna do? How about this? Let's have better trade relations with the US. That's our only hope. The regime depends on its very life for better trade relations with the US. So it's looking at our US politics and going, who do we want to be president? Do we want to have better trade relations with the US? Not Trump, right? So now they become pro-Hillary, because they figure that's our best chance, this Ecuadorian government. This is complicated, right? It's interesting. Should be a movie about this. They want better trade relations, so they want Hillary Clinton to be elected. So they're very upset that they're shielding this guy, Julian Assange, who they suspect is releasing all his emails, probably at the behest of the Russian government, which favors Trump. And so they didn't know what to do. They're like, we hate this guy. We're not going to kick him out on the street because he'd immediately be arrested, jailed, and probably executed for violating state secrets. But we will unplug his internet. And that's what they did. They unplugged his internet. His friends sent out to social media, oh my God, Julian Assange's internet has been unplugged. in retaliation for his release of the Hillary Clinton emails. It was done by the Ecuadorian government that wants her elected president. They suspected Julian Assange being used by Putin to manipulate US elections. The hackers were put on notice and said, you know what? There will be no denying freedom of information. If it's out there, we want to know it. You cannot do this anymore. You cannot deny this man's free speech rights. And the hacker community, within just a few short hours, brought down the internet over large parts of the US. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. You know what's most remarkable to me about this story? And it only occurred to me this morning when I read the New York Times account of it. The New York Times says, in light of all this, the Department of Homeland Security is investigating. My friends, the Department of Homeland Security has nothing to do with any of this. They have no power whatsoever over these complicated networks all over the world, all of which are controlled by private individuals. And in a massive complexity of privately owned infrastructure that no one can account for. It's distributed all over the planet. Homeland Security are just a bunch of nerds sitting around checking their Facebook accounts. I mean, they can't do anything about this. They can't investigate it. They can't prosecute it. They certainly can't stop it. Maybe they can do something about, hacks that happened 5 years ago. They can do nothing about hacks that happen in the future. They're powerless to fix this. And the idea that DIN or any other server company when seeing a DDoS attack on their servers would say, hey, somebody get the Homeland Security on the line. They would never do such a thing, right? Everybody knows that the government is completely useless to this newly emergent, massive global infrastructure world that's making our lives so much better every single day. Government is just not a player anymore. This system is too complex, it's too digital, it's too global, and it's too distributed. Government can work if you have a homogeneous population in a restricted area of geographic area where almost all the activity that takes place is bound up with the physical world. But once you migrate out of the physical world into the digital world and globalize it to a level of complexity where there's multiple trillions of activity happening every few seconds, it's beyond the capacity of any government. Government's stupid anyway, right? But under these conditions, government is completely useless and utterly outmoded. In other words, my friends, there's just too many anomalies entering into the system. There's too much going wrong with the old model. In a world where digits rule, where individual choice rules, where the power is in your hands and not in those of the politicians. The model of the total state that we've seen over the last 100 years is under too much pressure and cannot survive. This is why I would like to predict to you that the rest of your life is going to be extremely interesting. We are going to see, day by day, gradually in fits and starts, ever more freedom emerging for you and ever less power in the hands of bureaucrats. That may not always seem that way, but this is the underlying reality. This is the dynamic of history. If you long for a world of liberalism, as I do, you are alive in the right time. And you're in the right place. Because this new world that's emerging is going to take people like you and me to explain it, to celebrate it, and point out that the new liberty that's dawning in our time is the only system that's consistent with human rights, with human freedom, with peace, and with prosperity. all these institutions are dawning, and you can do something to further it. Through your own actions, through your entrepreneurship, through the choices you make in your life, by preparing your own financial and personal lives for a beautiful future, for never forgetting to secede from public life as they want to define it for you. Don't feel like you have to chase after, and celebrate one of these old school politicians that are running. You don't. You don't have to be part of that. You can be completely independent of it. You have the power, you have the intellect, and hopefully you have the philosophical apparatus to justify it and make sense of it. My friends, I believe that you and I are on the right side of history. Thank you so much for inviting me today. We have our left time, rarely, I've never do this, we have 7 minutes. Go ahead.
What would be your advice to somebody who may be voting for the first time and is just disgusted with everybody and saying, you know what, the hell with it, I'm not going to vote this time? What words of support, or what words of advice would you give?
Well, so I have a mixed relationship with voting. I'll tell you something. I wrote an article about a month ago. I said, look, I'm voting for the first time in my life. I'm voting, and I'm voting for Gary Johnson. And I had every intention of doing this, but I waited till the last minute. And so I went on the Georgia website to register to vote, and they had 5 steps. Oh, ouch. So I did the first step, I did the second step, and I got to the third step, the fourth step, and I finally got to the 5th step, and I put in all the rest of the data, and I was hating it, whatever, and so I clicked submit, and the website stuck. It's fun, and I waited, and I just got bored, and that was it. That was my great political activity for my whole life. That's how it turned out. But I would suggest looking at third parties. People naturally say, oh, this is a two-party system, third parties can't ever work. People said Trump could never get the Republican nomination, too. Weird things can happen. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it all's going to turn out. I have a sense that the two-party system could be vulnerable. It's pretty interesting. That said, I don't believe that the answer is politics, actually. I've been very impressed with what technology has done to liberate the world. Nowadays, I do things I couldn't do 10 years ago. Instead of having to take a municipal taxi, I now just click a button and grab a Lyft or grab an Uber. Instead of staying in a regulated hotel, zoned according to the way the state says I should have to stay, I now just go to Airbnb and hang out with some. You meet interesting people. I use Bitcoin a lot for a lot of my transactions. This is a non-state currency. It doesn't rely on any banks, any governments, or anything else. I buy from peer-to-peer services all the time that are not asking permissions of bureaucracies. These are technologies that have been invented, are not going away. They're going to long outlast the ruling class that's currently trying to regulate. This is what I mean. History has changed. We now have the technology to build a beautiful freedom in the world without these bastards. So I think, and look at schooling. It's fun. Nowadays people are. I know you're in college. It's great. It costs a lot of money, whatever. But a lot of people are thinking even the college system. They're discovering ways to get out. I would encourage you while you're in college to work in the private sector too, if you can, even if it was a volunteer. You need to start building your networks. This is really important. Your college degree alone is not going to carry you forward. We can talk about that in a break if you want to. But there's a kind of a new freedom that's happening. I would just suggest that we all prepare for it, and not just politically, but in every aspect of our lives. Okay. Other questions? Go ahead.
So there are a lot of progressive or really regressive types who are convinced that everything will go straight to hell without a dictating state.
Yeah.
Have you ever converted any of these people deliberately?
Yeah, I do all the time. This is the people who think that without the state, everything's just going to go to hell. I think converting these people, a lot of it has to do with your own. First of all, you have to come across as like a decent, friendly dude. This is nice. The alt-right seems to have a problem with this. I don't know if you've noticed. So you have to come across like really you actually care. And also, the easiest way to come across as something is to actually be that something. So, to actually care about others, to aspire for the best for society, to want to see an inclusive society that recognizes individual rights of everybody, is an important aspect of convincing people of liberal views. I think it's really important that libertarians just don't fly Gadsden flags that say "Don't tread on me." I mean, like, I agree with the Gadsden flag, whatever, but it's just not the best PR. What you should really hope for is the good of all, and that's not just rhetoric. There is only one system that actually benefits everyone, and that is the system of liberty. Every other system is benefiting some at the expense of others. Only liberalism really achieves the common good. So I think converting people is a lot of it's going to involve believing that and stating that. Then I think we can win. Go ahead.
Yeah, if, let's say Elon Musk succeeds and we become an interplanetary species, do you think we can escape the evils of government, or do you think it's going to follow us wherever we go?
Well, the problem of power is a universal problem of the human condition. So the fight never ends, right? We never arrive at that end state. We always have to beat it back. Government is only one species of power. The real evil in the world is power itself, as we learned from the Lord of the Rings. It's the ring, right? It's the thing that it should always just be thrown in the fire wherever you see it. I mean, that's just, nobody should have it. But it's just part of the structure of history and part of the structure of the human personality. We'll keep screwing up whatever we create. But the best we can do, and we've seen it happen. We can be free. We have been free. We are free now. We're freer now than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So we have real hope. But yeah, we also have a job to do. It's just something I learned in the course of my life. You can't believe it, but I was actually around in 1989 when the Soviet Union collapsed. And I really did, I can't look back at this, I feel it's so stupid. But I remember living through those several weeks, and at the end of it I thought, wow, I kind of got into this professionally because I wanted to do what I could to defend freedom and capitalism and individual rights, but wow, I guess the struggle's over. Everybody knows socialism is terrible, so I guess we're going to have freedom now. And yeah, I thought that for about 2 days, But I actually believed that briefly. Humanity is very stupid. We don't learn from history, which is why we need intellectuals to explain it. It's always a struggle. Yes, ma'am.
I used to work in Congress,
Yeah.
so yeah, it sucks. Do you feel that our whole system there needs to change? Like you were talking about, just the two-party system, but what do you think about like separation of powers, the judiciary? I mean, just in my own experience, Congress doesn't have any power anymore. Anyway, I mean,
Where does the power? The executive branch?
I think most of this is automatic and the bureaucracy more so than actual. At least when I was there, I didn't really see power.
This is, so it's really, you should actually write this up. You should write up your memoirs. I'd like to see more people who are active in politics tell the truth about the system. The politicians actually, in fact, don't have much power at all. And this is true under every system. Who's that guy? Who ruled the Soviet Union in the late 1950s? Help me out, David Friedman.
Stalin?
No, not Stalin. I mean Stalin. Khrushchev. Khrushchev was furious because he became the Soviet prime minister, and he was like, oh, great, now I've got all the power. And he worked and worked and worked to reform the system and felt that he couldn't do anything. He compared running the Soviet state to standing over a gigantic tub of dough and trying to turn it into some shape. It just couldn't. Yeah. That's Zelensky, yeah. This is true. In the US, we call it the deep state. We elect something like, 0.002% of the people who actually rule our lives. So there's lots of ways in which elections are silly. I mean, what politicians specialize in is getting elected and then getting elected again. They're not very good managers. So yeah, we have to do something about the problem of the deep state. And the deep state itself is dependent not so much on the personnel of the permanent bureaucracy, but on the laws that empower them so they can rule us, without any kind of political consensus. But the thing is that we've seen other times and other places where this apparatus collapses, and it collapses out of demoralization. If you're a bureaucrat in those conditions where you think nothing you do really matters, and you're sort of sick of trying, you eventually just give up. I mean, that's basically what happened in Russia. They said, okay, this stupid system doesn't work, and they just failed. I hope it comes to that point in the U.S. That's what it's going to take. I think you're right. It's not about electing the right people. It's about getting the trajectory of history headed in the right direction. Yes.
You talked a little bit about how this is starting to happen naturally, but I was wondering what your opinion is on what students and student groups can do to help deconstruct the illusion of legitimacy that's been upheld by the state.
On campus, you have to really represent libertarianism well. I think it's extremely important. Put your best foot forward. Be very knowledgeable. If you don't know the answer to a question, say, I don't know. I mean, argument hardly ever works. Friendship almost always does. We underestimate the power of friendship, actually. Getting to know people and presenting a good face and actually caring and having good discussions with people does a lot more than cornering them, at the after party in the dorm room and winning an argument. That rarely works. Friendship goes a long way towards promoting liberty. So I would say that's more important than anything else. As a student, a libertarian student, look at every other student, no matter what race, sex, religion, language, whatever, look at them as always as a potential convert. Never write off anyone, not even a Trump supporter.
I was going to ask, these new technologies that are coming out that you're excited about, which of them do you think is the best way to steal, for all of us to use, to steal power away from the government?
Well, you have many opportunities for free speech right now, and I suggest you use them. You should all be building your networks. I love Twitter, and of course there are others that are just fun, Snapchat, whatever, although I can't figure that thing out. But you should also look into cryptocurrency. This was an amazing thing. Until cryptocurrency came to be invented with Bitcoin, the internet economy was either barter or had to go through central banks. Now we have this final piece that allows a fully distributed private global economic structures to emerge. So getting used to that, I think it's really important actually. Acquiring Bitcoin and using it for the first time is like a weird hinge of your life. I mean, you do it one time, you never go back. It's just so awesome. It feels like freedom. So don't be afraid of it. Plunge into it. And by the way, I have some extra. So if anybody ever wants to download a wallet, contact me. I'm glad to give you some, just so you can have fun with it. I can just do that really quickly through, chat online, or if you're here and you download a wallet, I can just send you some Bitcoin and have some fun. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of the future.